Hello, and welcome to the software skills side of the Intro to Statistics course. My name is Adam, and I'm going to be guiding you through this set of videos where we go through the software skills primers. These are these primers that we have in PDF, and just get a feel for them. So what we're going to be doing today is we're just going to get started with Excel and R, where we're going to download Excel, the newest versions of Excel and R, which are the two programs that you're going to be using throughout the course of this tutorial and stats course. And we're just going to start to get a feel for what these programs look like and what are the kinds of things that we can do with them. So to start off, before we actually open up the programs, just make sure that you have the correct versions downloaded that you're going to be needing. So the way that you can do that is you can go to follow this link here in this PDF to this Queen's site, and also follow this link to the R website to download the most recent version. So I already have those pulled up. Just to give you a sense, I already have this downloaded on my computer, so I'm not going to do it again. But just to give you an idea of what the site looks like, it's just these first couple of links for whether you use Windows or Mac. And the R website looks like, actually I'm going to go back one sec. So when you follow the R link, it goes to this website, and there's a couple of links here. So if you're using Windows, you want to go to download R for Windows. If you're using Mac, you're going to go to the Mac one. I'm using Windows. So this next page looks like this. You want base, and you're going to download the most recent version here, which is 3.3.1. You have the option to download either 32-bit or 64-bit. I'm using 64-bit, and you probably do too. Both of them are going to work. Just one quick note about downloading this for Mac users. There's two different versions that you can download, and it depends on which operating system you're using. So if you're using Snow Leopard or Mountain Lion, then you want this link, 3.2.1. Or if you're using Mavericks, then you want 3.3.1. So just make sure you know which operating system you're using if you're using Mac, and you can find that information out, I think, just by clicking the little Apple icon up here. So now after you've downloaded the correct operating system appropriate software, the next thing that we're going to do is just create a working directory. So this is just going to be a folder that we're going to save all of our stats work to for these tutorial videos. So the way that you do that is you right click. I'm just going to create this on my desktop. You can create it somewhere else if you like. So you right click on the desktop and hit new, and then go up to folder, and that'll create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this stats course. Okay, so now we're ready to start playing around with Excel and get familiar with that. So when you first open Excel, it's going to open to, in a moment. Going to open to this window here, and we want to choose a blank workbook. Okay, so this is what Excel looks like. You've got rows and columns, and in each of these cells you can enter all kinds of things. So you can enter text, you can enter numbers, you can enter functions if you like. So for example, if I wanted to know, you can enter equations. So if I wanted to know what the sum of my two columns are that I created here, I could go equals and then the name of the cell, so B1 plus B2, and that'll give me the sum. There's all kinds of operations that you can do just to make simple calculations in Excel. So for example, if you wanted to do multiplication, you could go equals. You can also just click on the cells. You don't have to type them in all the time. You can go B1 times B2, or equals B1 divided by B2. Or you can take a power, for example, B1 to the power of B2. So any kind of equation you'd like, you can type in here. What we're mostly going to be doing with Excel for the tutorial section is organizing our data, or perhaps doing a few simple calculations with vectors before we load them into R. And we're going to learn how to load data into R in another tutorial. But just for now, let's work with a vector. So a vector is just a series of numbers. That is all a vector is. And so I'm just creating a vector here, just with some, the series from 1 to 10. And so you can do basic calculations on a vector in Excel by doing, typing in formulas or using functions in the adjacent cells. So for example, if we wanted to subtract 7 from an entire, from each value in a vector, we could go equals A1 minus 7. And then Excel allows you to actually just click this little square at the bottom right hand corner and just drag it all the way down, and it'll repeat this calculation all the way down. Some of the functions that we can use, I mentioned functions a couple of times. So for example, we can use the sum function, which is just called sum, and then you open a bracket and you can highlight this series of cells and it will sum up the values in that cell. Another example of a function would be the minimum function, where we ask for, I forgot to do my equals minimum, open bracket, and just highlight these cells and it'll give us the minimum value in our vector. Okay, so there's all kinds of stuff that you can do in Excel that are much more complicated than the stuff we're doing here. But just for now, I think we'll leave it there just to have seen what Excel looks like. And we can move on to R and see what that interface looks like. So when you open up R, this is what the first thing that pops up. This is what's called the console. And so different from Excel, with R we have to type in all of the calculations and all of the computations that we want to do in R. We have to type them in ourselves. And so this line here is just this blinking cursor is where we can start typing in commands. So similar to Excel, I can do basic calculations like 2 plus 2 and then press enter. And it'll tell me the answer is 4, or 2 times 2, and it'll tell me the answer is 4. But before I go any further with commands, what I'm gonna do is open up a script, and this is where we want to do most of our work in R. So I'll hit File and open a new script. So the difference between the console and what's called an editor or a script here is that the editor is a place where I can write in commands like 2 plus 2 or 2 times 2, and I can run them from here by hitting Control R, and then this will come up in the console. But the difference here is I can actually save this kind of like a text file or a Word file and refer to it later, whereas if you're just working in the console, if I were to close R right now, I would lose all the work that I had done up until this point, which of course we don't want to do. So anytime for all of the tutorials that you're going to be doing in this course, open up an editor first and always work in the editor. So because I want this to be sort of a neat little text file, I'm going to start with some labels. I'm going to call this primer 1. I'm just going to call this primer 1. Notice that I put a little number sign in front, and that's just allows me to make allows me to write in some text. And if I were to run this by hitting Control R, nothing happens. It just runs the text. Okay, so what I want to do here is start with making some variables. So in R, one of the things that we can do is create variables. So similar to in Excel, I'm going to make one called apple equals 2. And so here I'm telling R that I want the word apple to equal 2, and I want the word pie to equal 5. And the way that I run this is I hit Control R. Oh, I'm using Windows, so it's Control R. But if you're using a Mac, I think it's Command Enter, and then that should show up in the console here. So same thing for pi. I'll hit Command R, and I can check that that worked by writing pi and just running pi, and it'll tell me that pi, of course, is equal to 5, like we said. So once you've made these variables, you can do all kinds of stuff, like, if I wanted to know what's apple minus pi and ran that, it's going to give me the right answer for that. Or if I went apple to the power of pi. Okay, so that's making some variables in R. The next thing that I want to do is play around with some vectors. So let's make some vectors. So the first vector that I'm going to make, and as you recall, a vector is just a series of numbers, I'm going to call Julie. So the way that you make a vector in R is using the C function. So similar to in Excel, so you'll recall that in Excel we used the sum function and the minimum function, and it looked something like this. In R, functions look the same way. So they're going to look like some word, like mean or sum, with open and closed brackets, and you populate the command with the thing that you want the mean of, or whatever the function is that you're using. So if we want to make some vectors, I'm going to make one called Julie equals C, open bracket, and then just populate that with some numbers separated by commas. And then close the bracket and run that with Control R, and there we have it. We have a vector called Julie. Voila, isn't that fun? So now that we've made our vector, what are some of the things that we can do similar to what we were doing in Excel with Julie? So for example, if I wanted to know what a particular number was in the series, I could ask for what is the fourth number in Julie. So I would go Julie, open square bracket, 4, close square bracket, and run that. And it tells me that the fourth number in the series is 6. I can also do things like Julie minus 7, and it'll subtract 7 from each of the numbers in the vector. I can also do things like Julie minus Julie, and it'll subtract each of the numbers in sequence from the numbers in the vector in sequence, so we end up with all zeros. Okay. I think the last thing that I'd like to do in this video is make a plot. So we're going to make just a really basic plot to start off with, but R is a fantastic software for making really excellent and good looking plots. We can show some examples of that in future videos, but for now we're just going to make a really basic plot using the plot command. So the first thing that we have to do to make a plot in R is we need 2 vectors, right? We need an x vector and a y vector. So I'm going to use the examples from just the software primer here, just to save time. And so we're going to plot year and age. So first of all, we have to make our 2 vectors called year and age. And just to double check that those worked out, I'm going to ask for year, yep, and age. One thing to note, which is really important and is an easy source of frustration if you're new to R. R is really finicky about capitals and spelling and things like that. So I just asked for age here, and it gives me the vector. However, if I were to ask for age with a capital A, R doesn't know what that is because we haven't defined that. Or if we, made any variation aside from lowercase age, it's not going to know what that is. And the same thing applies for any of the functions that we've used before. So for example, if I wanted the mean age, I would have to type it in like that. If I typed in capital MEA for age, it doesn't know what the function, there's no such function called capital M mean. So just something to be aware of. R is really specific in that way. Okay, so now that we have our year and age vectors, we're going to plot using the plot command, and we're going to go year on the x-axis and age on the y. And this is a plot of life expectancies in Canada over the course of a number of years. So we'll go hit Control R, and there we go, our first plot. This is a really basic plot, as I had said before, and we're going to learn how in future videos to mess with how to label the axes, how to change the lines and the dots, and all kinds of things. The final thing that I want to do, just to close out this video, is I'm going to show you how to save your script. So now that we're done, we just want to make sure that we save this so we can return to this at a later time. So you save this in the same way that you would just a text or a Word file. You go to File and Save As. And I'm going to save this to the new folder that we just made here called Stats Course. And I'm going to call this Primer 1. And this should be saving as a .r file. And hit save. So there you have it. In the next video, we're going to learn how to load some data into R and start playing around with some data.